Hello, and welcome to the next video tutorial in the series of learning about P5.js. So in the last video or in the last tutorial, you learned about calling functions and like what P5.js is. You got your editor set up and all that good stuff. So far you've created your own sketch by calling functions and looking stuff up in the reference. This video sort of builds on that and introduces a new concept called variables. So I'm going to kind of walk through this written tutorial, just kind of, casually over this video. So to start out, I'm going to open up my P5 editor. And here we go. I have my code. I'm currently calling two functions, create canvas and background, and I could look up in the reference exactly what those are doing if I didn't remember exactly how they worked. But I think I'm going to leave it for now because I sort of talked about that last week. So to talk about this, maybe what I'll do is first I'll create a sort of example sketch, and then I will talk about some things that make that sketch kind of painful, and then I'll talk about how variables sort of solves these problems. So let me maybe real quick draw, I don't know, I'll draw a flower. That's my kind of go-to doodle. So right now my canvas is 400 by 400 pixels. That's what this line of code is telling P5.js to do. It's saying create a canvas, like a space where I can draw, and give it a size of 400 by 400. So I can kind of use those numbers sort of in my head to figure out where I want to draw my shapes. In this case, I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles sort of in the screen in a sort of flower shape. So I'm going to start by drawing the center circle, which will be at an X position of 200 and a Y position of also 200. And that is because since my canvas is 400 by 400, if I go to 200 by 200, that's like right in the middle of the 400 by 400. So that's where this like X and Y is coming from. And then I can kind of choose a size, honestly, kind of arbitrarily. I'll start with 100 just to see what it looks like. And yeah, I mean, 100 is fine. I think for our purposes, it's good enough. These numbers don't really matter because I'm going to change them all in a second. So let me maybe real quick draw some other circles. I sort of did this last week, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I want another circle in the upper left corner, and then one in the upper right corner, and then the bottom left and the bottom right. So let's start with the upper left circle. I actually don't know ahead of time what this is going to be. It's going to be based on these numbers. So maybe what I'll start out with is like 150, 150, and then the same size. That's kind of a guess. And yeah, that's good enough. I could change this around. I could make this a little bigger maybe, and then move it out a little bit more. Nah, let's keep it. Let's keep it and see what happens. Let me draw my other circles though. So this is in the upper left corner of my sort of overall flower. So I want my X position to be sort of to the right of the center. So the center is 200. So I'll move it to like 250. I want the Y position of this circle to be the same as my upper left circle. So I'll make that 150 as well. And then the size will stay the same. Run that and see what happens. Cool, cool, cool. And again, my bottom left circle will be at an X position that matches this one. So that's 150, but a Y position that goes below the center. And so the center, again, in both dimensions in this case is 200. So I'll go down to 250 and then I'll keep the size the same. So that should be my lower left circle. And then one more, I'll say circle. And this is going to be at 250, 250 because this is 200, 200 right here in the center. And I want it to be kind of down and to the right. And so it's going to be a little bit more than 200 in each case. So I want to run that. And cool, it works. I could add color and stuff at this point, but I think for our purposes, I will just keep it black and white for now because the colors don't change where it's drawn. Okay, so how do I want to talk about this? right now this works, right? I have a canvas, it's 400 by 400, and I draw a flower to that canvas, and it works. You can see the flower in the canvas. Now, the challenge is, what if I want to change the size of my canvas to make it either like large because maybe I want to display it on, I don't know, like a big screen in like an art gallery or something. Or maybe I want to make it really tiny because I want to display it on like a phone or something. Or I just want to make like a smaller image. So I can do that by changing my canvas size, first of all. So let me go down to like 200 by 200. And I'm going to run this. So what I'm changing is I am changing the parameters that I'm passing into create canvas so that my canvas will be smaller. It'll be 200 by 200 instead of the sort of default of 400 by 400. So I'm going to run this. And uh-oh, there's a problem, right? And that is my flower. So my canvas has resized. My canvas is now 200 by 200 pixels. But the problem is that my flower is sort of drawn like off the screen. And the reason for that is I haven't changed any of these numbers. So I'm still drawing my, say, my last circle, my center circle here at 200, 200, which is actually the bottom right corner of the entire canvas. So that's why you sort of see this center circle sort of centered at the bottom right corner, which, you know, probably isn't what I want. So what I want to do is resize my flower to match the canvas size. So in this case, resize my circles. So there's a few ways I can do that. One, I can just straight up do it manually. I can change all of my function calls to respect my new canvas boundaries. So maybe I'll do that actually, just to kind of model what that looks like. So I'll move my center circle first, even though it's the last one I'm drawing. It's the one I kind of base everything else off of. And I'll decrease my size to, let's say, 50. So I'm going to make my whole flower smaller, and this one will move the center circle up towards the middle of my canvas. Okay, cool. So now you see that my last circle here is now in the center of my canvas and it's a little smaller. You still see this. This is my actually my upper left circle because I haven't touched that yet. So let me change that now. So maybe I'll change that down to, I don't know, like 75. So I'm moving it sort of to the top and to the left of my current circle, and maybe I'll give it the, you know, same size. Okay. So, okay, cool. I've moved that circle, and now I need to do the exact same thing for my other three circles. So right now they're all kind of drawn off the screen. Actually, you can kind of sort of see the very tippy top of them, but that's, you know, not going to help us in our artistic endeavors here. So my next circle is my upper right circle. So I want to put that at like 125 or so because I'm moving it to the right of this 100. And I want the Y position to be the same as my first circle here. And then I want to change the size to 50. Okay, so I've got that one. And now we can kind of follow the pattern and do the same thing. So before, this is on the left and down. So I want this to be 75 and 75. And this is going to be 125 and 50. Actually, I'm going to keep it at 100 just to show you what happens. I'm going to run that. And you can see that moving the circles isn't enough because now I've got this weird overlappy thing. So I want to also decrease the size to 50. I'm halving it because I halved my from 400 to 200. So cool. I think that looks okay. And then my last circle will be 125, 125, 50. Cool. Let's run that and double check. And all right, cool. Now it works. Now I have a smaller canvas and I have a flower that fits inside that canvas kind of nicely framed. And cool, I could use this. I could, you know, whatever I'm going to do with it, I could like right click it and save as if I wanted to use it. just as an image. I could put it on a phone, whatever it is I need to do, I can do it. But now let's say I'm like, actually, you know what I want to do? I didn't want to go smaller. I actually wanted to go bigger. So now instead of 200 or even 400, I actually want it to be 500. And I want it to be 500. And we can run that. And now I have the opposite problem, right? And now I have this giant canvas, which I could use to, I don't know, print out a poster or something. But my flower is teeny tiny. So what I need to do is go through and do it all again. And that's super annoying. And that was annoying for 5 whole function calls. You can imagine how much more annoying that is when you have, a more complicated sketch. So I'm going to introduce first, like, one way you might approach this, which is actually the wrong way, but it's kind of how you might think about it if you didn't have variables. And then after we go through that kind of process, then I'll talk about variables, and it's going to be like the right way of doing things. So I have this canvas, and it's 500 by 500, or whatever width and height it is. And I have these circle calls, and these circle calls have parameters, which right now are values. And by values, really at this point, we mean numbers. Values are like direct. I'm trying to say that they're direct values, but I shouldn't define values by calling them values. But they are, in this case, numbers that you pass into a function. And so what I want to do is update all of my values to reflect the new 500 by 500 size. And so I could do that math in my head. I could say, well, when it was 200 by 200, this was 75. So if it's 500, then I need to multiply that number by some number and figure that out, which is actually exactly what I did to get to the 75 when I changed from 400 to 200. I sort of made all my numbers smaller, and now I need to go the other way and make them all bigger. And wouldn't it be nice if the computer could do that math for me? And, spoiler alert, the computer can do that math for you. So I wish I had picked kind of better numbers, but let's see. So when this was 400, my center circle, I'm going to start with my center circle, which is the last circle I'm drawing. I know that I always want this to be whatever this number is divided by 2. So I can actually just do that. I can say 500 and then divided by with a slash and then the 2. And then I want this number, this 100, this y value, to be whatever this number is divided by 2. Or you could do like multiply by 0.5, whichever one you're more comfortable with. I kind of mix and match, which is probably not great, but whatever, it works. So I might run that, and I'm going to maybe comment these out for now. I'm going to maybe rebuild them as I go. And all I've done right now is change the x and the y values to now be the result of this operator, this divided by operator. So I'm gonna, maybe I'll save that too just in case, and I'll run it. And now what I see is my circle is indeed in the center of my canvas, and here's kind of the power of it. If I change this number, let's say to like, I don't know, 100 and 100, then I don't really have to do the math anymore. I can just go and replace this with 100 and 100, and it'll work. And now it's towards the center of my canvas. I haven't touched the size yet, so it's always 50. And this is kind of a judgment call, honestly. Maybe you want your shape to always be in the center, but always the same size, or maybe you want to scale it up and down with the size of the canvas. Kind of up to you. To demonstrate it, I'll maybe do it. And so, what did I want that to be? I wanted it to be maybe whatever this number is divided by. What was it before? Now I'm losing track. It kind of doesn't matter. I can kind of make this number up. But let's say the width divided by, I don't know, 4 maybe. Let's see. So if I do 500 divided by 4, let's just see what that looks like. And why didn't that work? Oh, because I haven't changed these 100s back to 500. Okay, so now I have a uh, circle, and I'm drawing it in the center because I'm giving it an x value of 500, which is my width, divided by 2, a y of 500 divided by 2, and then a size of 500 divided by 4. So now, if I change this to like 100, 100, and I can change all of them to 100, this is now a little bit easier than doing all that math in my head, and it kind of scales and moves kind of automatically, and that's cool. That's a step in the right direction. Again, like I warned you, this is not how you should actually do it, but I'm sort of walking through this way of thinking about it to get us to our eventual goal. So I'm going to put this back to 500 by 500, and it's going to be kind of yucky, but let's maybe try these other circle calls. So my upper left circle is going to be what? Maybe it's going to be 500. Is it times 0.25? Maybe. Let's try that in both places. Times 0.25. I could do divided by 4. Like I said, I kind of mix and match them, which is, again, probably not the best practice, but maybe I'll fix it up in a bit. Okay, so I don't think that's right. Another thing I could do, since it doesn't really, I don't need an exact match to my drawing, maybe I'll just make my circles a little bigger. I think maybe that will solve my problem. And yeah, okay, cool. So now my circle kind of fills the canvas, and it's kind of up to you whether that's okay or not. You can kind of fiddle with the numbers, but what the important part is now my circles are sort of based on the size of the canvas. So if I change this to, I don't know, kind of random number, 200, 200, and if I change all of these to 200, 200, oh my goodness, this, like I said, this kind of gets annoying, but I'm doing this for a reason, I promise. 200 and 200. Okay, cool. So I'm going to run that. And now you see that my middle circle and my top left circle sort of stay in the same, relative distance from each other and size relative to each other. So I'm going to change all these back to 500 now. Oh my goodness. And run this, just double check. Okay, let me real quick maybe do the rest of these circles. So my upper right circle is going to be at what? 500 times 0.75 maybe? 500 times 0.75 for my x, because at 500 times 0.5, and maybe I'll go ahead and change them all to multiplication while I'm here, just so that we're all thinking in the same sort of style. You can do whichever one you want, but I want to maybe not mix and match them because that's probably going to get super confusing. So now I have my center circle at 500 times 0.5, which puts it right in the middle, and then a vertical position of 500 times 0.5, which again is right in the middle, and then the size happens to be 500 times 0.5 because it's, again, I'm filling up half the screen with it. So all those numbers are the same. So now back to my other circles. My top left circle is at 500 times 0.25 because it's like a little to the left of center. 500 times 0.25 because it's a little top of center, and then 500 times 0.5 because it's the same size as everything else. So now I'm back to my upper right circle, and the x position is going to be 500, which is the total width of the canvas, times 0.75, which will put it like over here for the x value. And then for my y value, I want it to be 500 times 0.25. I think I want that to be the same number as this top left circle, because I want it to be kind of above my center circle, and this will be the same size, 500 times 0.5. Cool. I'm going to run that, and maybe I'll wait to resize it because that's just annoying. So I want two more circles, lower left and lower right. I'm going to kind of just power through these because this is taking kind of longer than I wanted to. So my lower left circle is 500 times 0.25 x, and then 500 times 0.75 y, and then 500 times 0.5 for the diameter. Why are you complaining? Oh, okay. So I'm going to maybe pause here because, like I said in one of the last videos, getting errors in your code is totally normal. And I didn't plan on this. I didn't like sneak this error in here just to demonstrate it. This is a honest mistake that I just made, and I want to maybe talk about it and walk through, how I will figure it out. So what I noticed first is that I got like a red uh, highlight over here in the line number, and then I noticed a couple things. I noticed this red squiggly line and this red line. Even if I didn't notice them, well, maybe first I should like mouse over them, and it's saying expected and identifier, and saw the multiplication symbol. Okay, this one is okay, this was actually complaining about something else, but this is the one that says expected and identifier, and instead saw closing curly bracket. So that's one hint that I should maybe look at that line. If I run this, like if I didn't see that, maybe I'll run it and see what happens. And now I've got like unexpected token star, and I've got maybe some more information there. So that's an indicator that I need to kind of stare at this line of code. And what I will do is maybe just read through it really carefully. So I'll say, okay, so I'm looking for like a mistake that kind of looks different than what I expected. So I'm going to read through this and I'll say, okay, I'm calling the circle function by typing out the name circle, and that's like spelled right and all that. So that looks right so far. Then I have an opening parenthesis that looks right so far, and then a number, and then a comma, which, is right. But then I have a multiplication symbol. So I'm saying 500 as the first parameter, comma, then times 2.25, which doesn't make a lot of sense because the computer's saying, wait, what do you want to multiply by 0.25 here? You said that your first argument was 500, and now we're in the second argument because I saw that comma, and you're saying the second argument is multiplied by 0.25. That makes no sense. And, the computer's right. So I can also compare it to like the line above that, and I see, oh, okay, maybe I typed a comma by mistake there. So that's kind of how I walk through error messages when I see them. So let me double check this line. 500 times 0.25, 500 times 0.75, 500 times 0.5. Cool. That happened because I'm coding too fast, honestly, and that's why kind of taking your time and going slower can also be helpful. While I'm here, I'll also say that P5 has these like yellow kind of warnings, and these are more optional. These are P5 kind of recommending something different, but it's not that your code is wrong. It's just like a recommendation. So actually what it's complaining about is it wants me to put zeros in front of here. This doesn't actually matter. This doesn't change your code at all. The syntax is valid either way. P5 recommends zeros because it thinks that it's easier to read. I don't know. I kind of disagree, but it's kind of personal preference, but that's what P5 is complaining about. It's also complaining about that down here. So maybe I'll just do it to get rid of the yellow complaining highlights. So now it should be happy, and I'll run that just to double check that it's still working, and cool. And I'll do one last circle at 500 times 0.75, 500 times 0.75, and 500 times 0.5. And I forgot my zeros again because I don't know, kind of preferred that way anyway. But whatever, I'll add them and double check that it works. And there we go. Cool. Now I've got a flower, and this is so annoying, but I want to do this one more time just to sort of demonstrate the payoff here. But now let's say I change my mind again, and I say, you know what? Actually, I think 300 by 300 is the right number. And so what I can do is go through and change every single 500 to a 300. And this is annoying, but it's maybe less annoying than going through and doing the math myself. I've now sort of codified the math, and I'm telling P5 how to position all of my shapes through the power of, like, in this case it's all multiplication, but you can use division, addition, subtraction, and anything you can do on a calculator you can do on a computer. So let's double check that worked. And yeah, okay, now I've got my beautiful flower that is now in a canvas that's 300 by 300. Cool. So that is sort of one way to work around this problem of needing to position your shapes in relationship to the size of the canvas. But honestly, it's still pretty annoying. It's still annoying that I have to change my code in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 17 places whenever I want to change the canvas size, and that's just for 5 lines of code. So wouldn't it be really nice if P5 would handle that for me? And maybe that's a little window into a lot of coding. A lot of coding is trying to get the computer to do stuff that you don't want to do yourself. And I think that sort of sentiment will get us pretty far. Um, but wouldn't it be nice if instead of having to type 300 everywhere, wouldn't it be nice if P5 could keep track of that number for me? And that is where variables come into play. So maybe I'll start by going to the reference, and I introduce the reference as here's a list of all of the functions you can call in P5. It's actually more than that. It's basically everything you can do in P5. So it also includes variables. And the variables I want, maybe I'll just point them out, are like I'm looking for something that will keep track of the width and the height of the canvas. And wow, look at that. Here's width and height. And okay, this reference page isn't super great because it doesn't actually have an example. Let's maybe check the height one. Does it actually have an example? Nah. But that's okay. But what this tells me is that there are width and height variables that I can use in my canvas. So to use a variable, now that I know its name, I know that the name of those variables are width and height. You use a variable by typing its name. So everywhere I have a 300 where it's X, I'm going to sort of change that to width. So I'm just typing out the word width wherever I saw 300 before. Width, 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 and width. One important sort of distinction is I'm not typing width here, because this is me telling P5 what width to use. When I create a canvas, I'm saying create a canvas at whatever by whatever, in this case 300 by 300. And as part of that, as when P5 goes off and creates that canvas for us, it also gives us these variables. So like, don't put width here. That's going to break stuff. You put the actual value into the parameters of the create canvas function, and then after that you can use width and height. So now I'm going to say height here because this is my y value. Height, 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 and one more height. And okay, so maybe I'll pause there for a second and I'll save this and run it just to double check. First I'll not change anything just to double check that it works. And cool, it does. Nothing changed, which is what I expected. Let me now make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to go to 400 by 400. And okay, that didn't work. Something weird happened. And that's because my size is still based off the old values. And I could maybe start out by just choosing one, width or height. Right now they're the same number, and so it'll work, but I'll maybe talk in a minute about what will happen when it's not a square. So let me run that and see what happens. And cool, now I'm back to my flower sort of filling my canvas, and it's because I've called all of these functions sort of based on the width and height variables. And now I can really control it and say, okay, I want to go down to 200 by 200. And that's the only thing I have to change. I change one line of code in my sketch and everything magically works because I used the width and height variable. So I can change this to, I don't know, 500 by 500 again. I'm starting to forget which numbers I've already used. But you can kind of imagine that no matter what numbers I pass into this, it will magically work. So great. Cool, cool, cool. Maybe the last thing I'll talk about, I always say that and then talk about like 10 more things, but this is the last thing I plan on talking about, is what happens if I don't have a square canvas. So right now, my width and height are the same number, so I could actually get away with only using width or height, but what happens if they're different? What happens if, say, I say my height is actually 200? And I don't know, if you're watching and you're kind of following along, maybe I'll say like, maybe pause the video for a second, and what do you expect to happen? What do you think will happen when I hit play? Now that I've changed my height of my canvas to 200, what will happen? This is me waiting while you're paused. Okay, all right. So you paused it, and now you're back, and you have a guess. Let's run it and see what happens. And, ugh. So I don't know. Was your guess right or not? You tell me. Um, but let's kind of think about what's happening. So what's happening is first I'm creating canvas that's 500 by 200. Great. Then I'm drawing a background, and you can kind of see that there's like gray in there. My flower is filling up the screen, but it's there. Then I'm drawing actually, let's jump down to this center circle. I am drawing a circle in the center with width times 0.5, height times 0.5. That's cool. And then I am giving the circle a size of width times 0.5. And now the width of the canvas is 500. So the diameter of my circle is 500 times 0.5, which is 250. And so that's why vertically, my circle kind of goes off the top and bottom of my canvas, because my circle has a diameter of 250. I don't know if you can see my hands, but the canvas only has a height of 200. So my canvas height is 200 pixels, but I'm drawing a circle with a diameter of 250. So it's just too big. And that same kind of thing is happening with all of my circles. They're just kind of too big because my canvas is scrunched. It's not very tall. So what I want to do is scrunch my circles. There are a few options for what I could do, but that's what I'm choosing. I'm choosing that when I don't have a square canvas, I actually want to kind of squish my drawing. And it's kind of up to you what you do, but I'm going to go with that just to sort of demonstrate that that process. And so let me check something. Actually, I don't know this off the top of my head. So I'm going to go to the reference. I'm going to go to the circle function. And will this take a fourth parameter, or do I have to change this? No, it won't. Where the width and height of the ellipse are the same. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, so I am looking at the circle function reference because what I wanted to find out was there a way to give my circle like a width and a height kind of separately? And what this reference is telling me here is no, I can't do that. But what I can do is call this other function, this ellipse function. So okay, let's check that out. And I think this is exactly what I was looking for. This is x, y, width, and height. Cool. So let's try that. Let's go back to my editor and let's change all of these circles. Actually, let's start with the center circle. I kind of like to work like one step at a time. So instead of changing all of them once, I will change just one circle. So all I want to do is change the name of the function. Now I'm calling ellipse instead of circle. Let's see what happens. And okay, so far nothing happened, but I think what I can do is give it a fourth parameter. I'm going to say comma, and then I'm going to say height, which is my other variable that I want to use, times 0.5. And this time I'm going to remember the 0. Give myself some more room for typing, and now I'm going to run this. And what I expect is the center circle to be kind of scrunched. And it is. It looks kind of ridiculous with my other circles not being scrunched, but let's solve that problem now. So maybe I'll just replace these now that I've kind of proven that it works with one of them. Ellipse, 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 ellipse. Maybe I'll run this just to double check that it works. Okay, cool, cool, cool. And now I want that same parameter passed in, which is based on the operator, the multiplication operator, between the height variable and a value of 0.5. And I want that for all of the circles. Actually, maybe let me run this with just the upper left circle. And yep, okay, I can see that that changed. So I can kind of maybe copy that pattern into my other circles. Ta-da! So now what I have is a canvas, which is 500 by 200, and a flower that's kind of squished, but that's okay because since I've used the width and height variables to decide the position and the size, broken up into width and height, it still looks like a flower. Well, it still looks as much like a flower as my original flower did. Again, I'm not really an artist, but so I'll leave it up to you to decide whether 5 circles counts as a flower. But if you counted my first flower as a flower, I think that this counts as a flower as well. And now the real payoff is now I can really play with these, the size of my canvas. And I'm going to maybe change this. And it works. 200 by 200. Maybe I'll go the other way. Maybe I'll make it really tall. And I'll say 200, 400. And it still works. And it's, it's scrunched, but it works. It's still a flower. And no matter what size I throw at it, it'll do the work for me of laying out the shapes sort of in the canvas and sized relative to the canvas, because I have used these width and height variables. Let me double check that there's other stuff I want to talk about. I think that's probably good. I think I've covered all the notes I wanted to cover. Maybe one thing I'll talk about again, like I said, I think I lied to you earlier. This will maybe be the last thing. Is a very common problem when you're dealing with the width and height variables is to mix them up, especially if you have kind of this kind of messy looking code where it's just a bunch of parameters. It's very common to kind of accidentally type one when you mean the other. So let's just kind of introduce what that might look like. So I'll change that to height, and I'll change this to width. So, ahead of time, you kind of know what I'm doing, so you can kind of anticipate the problem. But what I've done is I am drawing an ellipse. This is my upper left ellipse, and it's at a x position of width times 0.25, which is right, and then a height or a y value of height times 0.25. So that's going to be up here. But then I kind of switched the width and the height in the arguments I give it. So let's just see what happens. And yeah, you'll get kind of artifacts like this where my circle is scrunched in the wrong direction. And that's because I kind of switched my width and height variables here. That's another reason it's super, super important to kind of write one line of code at a time and really test it. Hit that run button every 5 seconds and double check, like, hey, is that shape drawing where I thought it was? Because you'll catch errors like that much faster, much easier than if I tried to write this whole thing. I promise I would make 500 mistakes and then I'd hit run and I would cry. So don't cry. Just run your code every 5 seconds, and when you get an error, you'll be able to catch it a lot sooner. So I think that's as far as I want to go in this video. That is the power of variables. They let you get information from the computer. In this case, it's the width and the height of the canvas. But down the road, it'll be kind of more complex things like user input or kind of information about the sketch that lets you do animations and randomness and all kinds of really exciting stuff. But the concept is sort of rooted in these fundamentals of when you have a variable, the way you use it is exactly like you can use any other value, only you type the name of the variable instead of that value. So in this case, I'm using width and height and then multiplying them by other values to kind of position my drawing in my canvas. And that lets me draw without worrying too much about like what size I ultimately choose, because this will, likely change depending on where you are showing your sketch or how you're displaying your sketch. Cool. So I think that's as far as I want to go. Maybe the very, 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 very last thing I'll do is just add some colors to demonstrate that you can mix and match this stuff with the other kind of techniques that we've already played with. So maybe I'll give it a fill color of red and maybe a fill color of, I don't know, green, just for fun, RGB. And, I'll maybe point out that the fill function and like the background function, it doesn't really, well, I don't want to say it doesn't make sense, but in this case, it doesn't really make sense to pass in like width here, because the fill color is not related to the size of my canvas. There are some interesting things that you can do if you maybe want to play with that. But my point is that you don't have to use these variables in every single function call that you're making, only in the function calls that sort of place and size the shapes on your screen. Stuff like the color functions, those you'll generally pass in like hard-coded values like this. But when you're drawing shapes, use your width and height variables to make your life so much easier. Cool. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one where we will learn about, I think, creating your own variables next. But for now, maybe get some practice with these width and height variables, and I look forward to seeing what you create. All right. See you in the next one.